If you've grown up in the 2000s, you've probably watched the famous Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone movie. Perhaps, like me, you thought that the Philosopher's Stone was something made up by the author of the books, J.K. Rowling. Well, it was not. The Philosopher's Stone is an ancient enigma that many still struggle to unravel. This stone has mainly been studied in a strand of thought known as alchemy. To alchemists, this stone would have had the power to turn cheap metals, such as mercury, into precious ones, such as gold. It has also been called the elixir of life, since it's supposed to bring rejuvenation and immortality. If we break down the words, in Greek, philos means love, and sophia means knowledge. So we're talking about the love for knowledge stone, or the stone of the wise. It has also been called the stone of true care for wisdom and the wisdom of right action stone. Whew, it sure has had many, many names. The thing is, alchemists couldn't really agree on whether the Philosopher's Stone was something physical, like in the Harry Potter movie, or if it was nothing but a metaphor for personal transformation. You see, one of the bases of alchemy is transformation, mixing up elements and getting a brand new one in return. And throughout the Middle Ages, many books on alchemy describe the stone as something real. For the ones that believed that the stone existed, they often described it as red or white. The white version is a less mature version of the red one. One could find many recipes on how to produce the Philosopher's Stone. But in the end, the authors of these books would always mention that only those who were worthy or initiated into some kind of group would ever discover the secret to producing the stone. One guy is believed to have discovered the secret recipe for the stone, Nicolas Flamel. Flamel was a French scribe and manuscript seller, and in some accounts, he had a prophetic dream about the exact manuscript that hid the secret recipe to the Philosopher's Stone. In other accounts, he met an alchemist on the road to Santiago de Compostela, from whom he had learned some important secrets. Some say that Flamel did manage to produce the stone and produced the elixir of life, becoming immortal himself. In other accounts, he came into great money later in his life, which led some to believe that he did manage to create gold. There's no way to be sure if this ever happened. Either way, Flamel has appeared in a few fictional stories, such as Harry Potter. Yep, in the movie, he appears as a French wizard responsible for having manufactured the Philosopher's Stone. But someone even more famous has mentioned the Philosopher's Stone in their writings, Sir Isaac Newton. One of the world's greatest scholars, Newton spent quite some time researching the recipe of the stone. He wanted to get in touch with it because he strongly believed it could help explain the origins of metals and minerals. It was only in 1617 that the stone appeared as something other than a physical stone. It was represented in geometrical form by an alchemist named Michael Meyer. For him, the stone was a composition of the shapes of a triangle, a square, and a circle. Oh yes, and a man and a woman right in the middle of the circle, representing the masculine and the feminine. In the text following the image, he wrote that it was only through persistent work and effort that a person could start to understand the teachings of the Philosopher's Stone. But what exactly would these teachings be? In the 19th century, some alchemists and philosophers started to understand the stone as metaphorical rather than literal. For these thinkers, the transformation old alchemists were talking about was most likely to happen from a psychological point of view. Simply put, they claimed that alchemy, transmutation, or transformation could happen on an inner as well as an outer level. Alchemists even named this process of transformation magnum opus, or the great work. Sure, for the earlier alchemists, this meant transforming weak metals into stronger ones. But the interesting thing is that this process does work both literally and metaphorically, doesn't it? You've probably heard the common expression that says that diamonds are only made under immense pressure. Well, this phrase is completely in line with the alchemical idea of the great work. We can find examples of the great work in many mythologies, but one that illustrates this perfectly is the story of Hercules. Yes, that same Hercules from the Disney movie. except that today we're exploring a different side to his story. You see, Hercules is a Greek mythological figure, and according to the story, he had to prove his worthiness through 12 nearly impossible tasks, also known as the 12 labors of Hercules. As with most mythology, these stories exist to help humans understand and make sense of their own experiences. Coincidentally or not, the medieval recipes to create the Philosopher's Stone could also include a process of 12 alchemical steps. Let's dive deeper into this. The original story of Hercules says that he was cursed by his arch-nemesis Hera and committed an awful crime against the people he loved most in the world. When he woke up from the curse, he felt extremely guilty and regretful of what he had done. After consulting with the Oracle of Delphi, a famous oracle of Greek mythology, Hercules went to seek guidance from his king. The king told him that he could be forgiven for his crime if he was willing to successfully complete some pretty difficult tasks. Hercules immediately agreed and embarked on what would become a 12-year journey. For his first task, Hercules had to defeat the so-called Nemean lion. The creature was considered a beast by those who lived in the town it haunted, but the lion had some sort of impenetrable skin, making it nearly impossible to defeat it. Our buddy Hercules did have a hard time fighting it, but in the end, he managed not only to defeat the lion, but to cut off its skin and use it as a mantle to protect him in his later adventures. Quite some labor, huh? According to psychologist Stephen Diamond, if we analyze the symbolism behind Hercules' historic journey, we can find many parallels to human existence. To him, we are often faced with what seems like impossible tasks in our daily lives. Things that require almost heroic strength and stamina from all us earthlings. Sure, we are not literally facing lions, but we are constantly dealing with breakups, losses, and getting fired from our jobs. Psychologically speaking, we could say that when we successfully confront and overcome a difficult challenge in life, we feel empowered. Maybe we even feel a bit heroic ourselves, feeling like what doesn't destroy us makes us stronger. And nope, it wasn't Kelly Clarkson that said this first. It was the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. After conquering a lion, Hercules had to face that famous Hydra, similar to the one that appeared in the animated film. The Hydra was a multi-headed serpent, and each time he tried cutting one of its heads off, 2 more heads grew instead. Oh, he also had to steal some shiny golden apples from some super inaccessible place. Not one of his tasks was easy. But Hercules managed to conquer each one with great ability, using his wisdom and intellect rather than physical force and strength. Many say this is what the great work has always been about, getting into contact with one's virtues. In each one of Hercules' labors, he would conquer or acquire a new virtue. He would learn about humility, courage, patience, temperance, generosity, and wisdom. Oh, and coincidentally or not, there are also 12 main human virtues one should aspire to acquire throughout their life. I know this got quite philosophical, but after all, we're talking about the Philosopher's Stone, aren't we? The majority of us have believed for a really long time that Stonehenge, one of the most iconic monuments in the world, was an ancient calendar because of its alignment with the summer and winter solstices. But no one could figure out how it really worked. Now, a team of researchers have come out with another study. It turns out that Stonehenge could have functioned like the solar calendar. It's a similar principle to the solar calendar ancient Egyptians used to have, the one based on a year composed of 365.25 days. Each of the stones from this big mysterious sarsen circle represented one day within a month. Sarsens are what we call these large boulders. It's actually a perpetual calendar, where people could track every winter solstice sunset. That way, those who lived near Stonehenge, which is today Wiltshire, UK, could keep track of the days and months of the year. We all now understand this mysterious calendar system because of this interesting discovery in 2020. The team has identified the source of 50 of the 52 sarsens that make up the iconic stone circle we all know about. They analyzed the chemical composition of these sarsens and traced their origins to the West Woods in Wiltshire, which is about 15 miles away from the monument. Not only did these 50 sarsens come from the same source, but they were also placed in their current position at approximately the same time. They make the outer circle of Stonehenge, together with a horseshoe-shaped inner ring. Near the center of the monument, there are smaller rocks, known as bluestones. The team traced the origins of the bluestones all the way to Wales. They also discovered that the sarsens share a common chemistry, over 99% silica with trace elements. Two sarsens were different from each other and also different from the main cluster. These sarsens were arranged in 3 different formations at Stonehenge. 30 of them formed this huge stone circle that dominates the monument. 4 station stones ended up in a rectangular formation outside the circle, while the rest, located inside the stone circle, were constructed into 5 trilithons. A trilithon is when you have 2 vertical stones with a horizontal lintel at the top. 30, 5, and 4 are pretty interesting numbers in the context of this calendar system. The 30 uprights that are spread around the main sarsen ring could represent days of the month. If you multiply that by 12, you get 360. Add on 5 more, those from the central trilithons, and the result is 365. And to really adjust the calendar to match a solar year, you need to add 1 extra leap day for every 4 years, right? The team believes the ancient people used the 4 station stones to keep track of this part. So, in this system, they paired the summer and winter solstice every year with the same pair of stones. Ancient people started building Stonehenge about 5,000 years ago, and it took more than 1,000 years to finish the work. But the Stonehenge you see today is not the complete, original version from the beginning. People have broken and taken away many of its old bluestones and sarsens. The entire structure also changed over time since there were generations and generations, 180 of them to be precise, that passed since the beginning of Stonehenge, who would participate in the building and rebuilding of it. People created Stonehenge in 4 stages. They first built a circular enclosure that stretched over 330 feet, 100 meters, in diameter and went around 56 pits. A high bank flanks the ditch of the enclosure, while there's a low bank on the outside. Some theories even say that this part was some form of a communal cemetery. Later, in the second stage, builders added a horseshoe of sarsen trilithons. In the third stage, they constructed a ceremonial avenue that was nearly 2 miles long. It possibly traced the path of the bluestones. People moved from the Aubrey holes to the Q&R holes, a double arc that these bluestones have been arranged into. At this stage, builders also reorganized the entrance stones and recut the main enclosure ditch. During the fourth stage, the stones were broken and builders etched carvings into the sarsens. Later, the bluestones ended up being modified again. Builders didn't leave any written records about how they managed to drag these heavy stones to the site and get them to stand so perfectly upright. But there are theories that say their techniques were more closely associated with woodwork than masonry. They made mortise holes and protruding tenons because they wanted to slot these stones together, and they used tongue and groove joints to do that. When they dug the hole for the stones, they placed timber poles at the back of the holes that were used as brace support. Then, they moved the stone into a position and hauled it upward with ropes. They packed rubble into the hole to make sure the stone stayed in place. A pre-industrial farming society put this fascinating monument together using only tools made of stone and bone. Not even the wheel had been invented yet. This unusual formation is also known as ringing rocks. The stones you can see at Stonehenge have some pretty odd acoustic properties. When you strike them, they produce a loud clanging sound. That could be one of the reasons why people bothered to transport them over such a long distance in the first place. In some ancient cultures, people believed that these rocks contained healing powers. It's a really popular location that attracts over 1 million visitors a year. When it first opened to the public, visitors were allowed to walk among the stones. They could even climb on them, as there weren't any restrictions. Until the 19th century, visitors would regularly chip off pieces of the rock to take them home as souvenirs. They would also engrave their initials into the stones. They camped within the circle and dug fire pits, not realizing that the digging pits could seriously undermine the stability of the entire monument. Over time, visitors have encountered more and more restrictions until the monument was finally roped off in 1997 because of the serious erosion of the stones. That means if you want to visit, you can only view it from a distance unless you want to pay extra for the stone circle experience, which can be arranged outside of normal visiting hours. Stonehenge originally had two entrances that led into the enclosure. There was a wide one to the northeast and one that was a bit smaller and located on the southern side. If you look at it today, you can see there are many more gaps. This is mostly because of tracks made later that once crossed the monument. The ground within Stonehenge has been severely disturbed, and it wasn't just about random visitors digging fire pits. There was a group of people who dug a large deep hole within the stone circle in the 17th century because they were looking for treasure. Then there was Charles Darwin, who also did some digging because he was studying earthworms in the area. He wanted to know how these worms could impact objects in the soil over time. He observed how a fallen stone there had sunk deeper into the ground and realized it was happening because of the activities of these tiny creatures who churned through the soil all the time. In 1963, there was a theory that Stonehenge had been built as some sort of computer that predicts solar and lunar eclipses. Later, some proposed it was actually constructed as a monument to ancestors that had passed away. This theory says the permanence of its stones represented the eternal afterlife. The average sarsen you can find there weighs 25 tons, while the biggest one weighs around 30 tons. If you want to get an idea of how massive these stones really are, you can go behind the visitor center in the outdoor gallery to check out a replica sarsen stone. It's a true copy of a freestanding upright from one of the trilithons that are located in the inner horseshoe of the monument. There are 5 Neolithic houses at Stonehenge based on real archaeological evidence of houses found in that area. Each of them had stake-built walls and a chalk floor. Some even had furniture. There was also a lot of trash discovered, which means people in this area used to like celebrations and feasting. Research has shown that people lived in these houses for 50 to 100 years, around 4,500 years BCE, which was the time when the builders brought the sarsen stones to Stonehenge. During the time they were building Stonehenge, generations of people went through major changes themselves, from the Stone Age to the early Bronze Age. They were no longer as static and isolated. They started to travel and trade more, which means they communicated way more than their ancestors, even internationally. This is how they could have spread the word about Stonehenge, and it's also when the whole mystery and fascination with the monument began.
Imagine working 7 days a week on a large-scale construction site. You, along with thousands of others, carry millions of stone blocks and put them on top of each other according to a complex system. You work without modern construction equipment. You have no air conditioning or constant access to water. It's so hot outside that you can fry eggs on the road. You've been building the pyramid for decades, and now, when it's finally done, you enjoy the result of the colossal work of thousands of people. You're looking at a giant cultural monument of global value that will freeze in time and amaze people for tens of thousands of years. A few thousand years have passed. People in the 21st century see the pyramids and are like, wow, I can't believe humans have built this. Yeah, the people who built the pyramids wouldn't have appreciated such a theory. But actually, there are reasons to believe that people built it using some fantastic technology. From the outside, it seems the Great Pyramids are just big triangles of stone. People just put some heavy blocks on top of each other, and that's it. In fact, the design seems too perfect to be true. The pyramid consists of more than 2 million blocks. They lay so close to each other and are so even that you couldn't squeeze even a thin sheet of paper between them. Scientists still can't figure out the exact technology for building the Egyptian pyramids. One of the biggest and most famous is the Great Pyramid of Giza. This huge construction, well known all over the world, has one big secret. There should be a capstone on top of the pyramid. It's a triangular-shaped stone block. a small pyramid on top of a huge one. It's also called a pyramidion. The builders of ancient Egypt made it out of granite and limestone and covered it with gold. No records or old drawings prove that there was a pyramidion at the top of the Great Pyramid of Giza. But there's another ancient Egyptian structure with such a triangle, the Red Pyramid. It was built before the Great One, and its capstone has survived to this day. Archaeologists have found and reconstructed it. But where could the capstone of the Great Pyramid be? It's a mystery that still has no answer. Some are sure that some thieves have stolen it from the top. Maybe they just climbed up and pushed the pyramidion down. It makes perfect sense. The capstone was probably the most valuable element of the pyramid. Many scientists and archaeologists still don't know its exact purpose. Some believe that this peak covered with gold glorified the pharaohs. The capstone reflected moonlight at night and illuminated the entire space around it. During the day, the capstone reflected sunlight with its shiny surface. You could have noticed it from afar. The top of the pyramid was a kind of guiding star for lost travelers. All other stone blocks of the pyramid consist of limestone. People polished them to make them look shiny. In the past, they were even glowing and reflected light. You could see glowing pyramids from space, although they looked like tiny lights. Over thousands of years, winds, sandstorms, and rains have changed the pyramid's appearance. If people had taken care of them all this time, they would have looked like something out of science fiction movies, or the pyramids from Las Vegas. But unfortunately, we will never see their original appearance. Some archaeologists and scientists believe that the capstone could absorb the sun's energy and distribute it evenly throughout the pyramid. No one knows precisely why the Egyptians needed this technology. There's a theory the pyramids are ancient energy systems. The pharaohs applied this energy to use some unique technologies that were more advanced than all the achievements of the 21st century. And the triangular shape of the pyramids was ideal for boosting this electromagnetic energy. In theory, solar radiation, or electromagnetic forces, accumulated at the top of the pyramid, filled the inner rooms, and then went down the walls to the base. Any surface distortion could prevent the flow from spreading, so they had to create a perfectly smooth surface. That's why they installed the blocks so that nobody could squeeze a needle or razor blade between them. Many people believe in this theory because they built the pyramids from limestone. This material can hold energy inside itself. In the inner part, they created granite deposits to cause air ionization, that is, to create an electric charge. They also dug channels under the pyramid for water to transmit electricity. And at the top, they put a gold capstone, the best conductor of electricity. So, this is how you get a great power generator. Different cultures used similar technologies to create electricity all over the world. But these are all theories. If it had been working, humanity would have used these technologies today. There are mentions of the metal industry, chemistry, engineering, physics, mathematics, and astronomy in some ancient records. Most scientists don't believe in all these things. We know the detailed stages of the technology's development in different cultures. In the 21st century, scientists, historians, and anthropologists can track the evolution of all modern devices. If people had created some technological inventions in ancient times, the history of the world would have looked different. Perhaps all the achievements of antiquity could have been wiped off the face of the earth by global cataclysms, and it can happen to us. Just imagine how people would dig up a laptop in 5,000 years. Perhaps they wouldn't understand what kind of device it is. Another Egyptian wonder surrounded by mystery is the statue of the Sphinx. The Egyptians carved it out of a single massive piece of limestone about 4.5 thousand years ago. But scientists still don't know the exact date of its construction or who built it. People painted the Sphinx in different colors. so it looked much brighter and more vivid in the distant past. It was shining just like the Great Pyramids. Anyway, time hasn't only changed its appearance, but its name too. Initially, the Egyptians called it Hor-Mekhet. The Greeks renamed it the Sphinx about a few hundred years after it had been built. The Sphinx emphasized the greatness of the rulers of Egypt. It also performed a symbolic function of a watchdog guarding the tomb of the pharaoh and the paths leading to it. This version sounds realistic, since archaeologists have discovered many secret entrances at the foot of the Sphinx. Perhaps these rooms and intricate tunnels lead to underground halls with treasures. And treasures don't always mean gold and jewelry. According to legends and theories, the Sphinx guards the Hall of Records, the storage of all humankind's knowledge. The information about the ancient mythical state of Atlantis could be there. You can find many detailed maps of the internal dungeons of the Sphinx on the internet. They show structures 12 stories deep under the statue. It looks like a small city filled with gold, scrolls of knowledge, and various ancient artifacts. But don't believe all these maps. These are just theories. Several thousand years have passed, but people have very little information about it. Archaeologists know that there are still many strange and exciting things about the Sphinx that are still undiscovered. Some locals are afraid to research because they believe they can awaken something terrible from the underground depths. Therefore, it's mostly scientists from other countries who conduct the excavations. In 1998, scientists discovered strange tunnels leading to empty rooms under the Sphinx. They realized that some people tried to get there through tunnels in the past, and maybe those people took all the treasures that were there. One of the legends says that some powerful artifact lays beneath the Sphinx. Its technology can change the whole world, but the locals are hiding it because it can damage the planet. Some believe that you can find evidence of unknown technologies painted on the granite walls in the pharaoh's tombs. But most likely, these paintings and signs tell us the myths and legends of ancient Egypt. But what if Egyptian symbols and drawings are detailed instructions for using ancient technologies? What if the locals that lived at that time thought, people in the future won't be able to get energy themselves. Let's leave some detailed instructions for them. Anyway, there are many riddles and theories. In reality, the search for answers is a dangerous undertaking, since it's not easy to get into the underground halls. Excavations can ruin the structure of the entire Sphinx. Any person inside the tunnels may get lost and never be able to find their way back. Besides, it costs a lot of money. Now, what would be awesome is if people could invent some device that could scan underground areas and show their detailed models.